Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bazaar Explained. And just like I was saying yesterday, we have a brand new patch today here on April 16th, and it has some pretty incredible changes, I must say, and why not jump into it? So, first and foremost, Dooley no longer begins a run with a core, and at level 3, they choose one of the 5 cores. I think that this is going to really change how Dooley plays fundamentally, and I think it's going to be pretty healthy for the game. Dually, as it stands, you get your core in the beginning, and there's so many runs where you just don't end up utilizing your core because of the items that are presented to you, never synergized with it to begin with. So now you have about 2-3 days to develop before you choose your core, and we'll get into it in a little bit, but the cores have been changed so that they synergize much better with your items. So instead of having kind of building around the core itself, you build a run and then you choose a core that will best fit the run that you have. So that's super cool. With that, also the catalyst is going to be something you're going to be seeing a lot in your Mac runs. So it is the item, and we can pull it up here on bazaar.gg. It is this item, which you have probably seen before, but now it does something very different. So as we can see here, instead of it saying after you buy or sell 3 reagents, you transform this and enchant it, instead what it does is when you sell it, you transform your leftmost small item. So this is now going to enable you to utilize the items like the calcinator, like the retort, like the philosopher's stone to really stack up a lot of the value really quickly, or getting more stats on them, because you just have access to something else that's going to transform items instead of relying on the different events throughout the day like we see with Mandala or with your level up events. And to that point, we'll see in a little bit here, that has now been a pretty big change in that so many of the items that Mac has now are going to give you catalysts. So with that, I think this is going to be a pretty big change here. Also, the Harkuvian launcher is now changed in name, and that's one of those large items that you don't see that often. And Truffles now no longer has a loot tag, which I would say is actually a bigger deal than it might seem on first glance. But why don't we go ahead and just with this catalyst change, let's jump into looking at Mac. So with Mac here, we see that there are so many different items now that are going to give you a catalyst to then transform your items. So we see the Olympic is doing it. We see the Aludel is doing it. The Apothecary. We are also seeing the Laboratory is going to be doing that. Mortar and Pestle is going to be doing that. There's so many different ways now to get a catalyst that this is going to be a new bread and butter way for you to enable that value stacking synergy, or I guess that damage stacking synergy on a thing, again, like a calcinator or even a philosopher's stone. So this is a huge change for Mac, and one that I think is going to be pretty important overall, just in the way that he's going to be playing for the rest of the season. Some other big things on Mac is that the boiling flask, as we see here, is now at gold tier, so a little bit of a nerf, and also it has its cooldown reduced, which I think is good overall. Having an 11-second cooldown to try and reload your items generally didn't synergize well with your potion builds. You were just kind of utilizing it to ultimately try and get like your vat of acid to go off 2 times or your bottle explosion to go off 2 times, but now it actually is sort of keeping up on pace with where it should be, I would say, or at least 2 seconds behind where it should be for reloading your items. But the big thing here is that it also says adjacent potions have +1 multicast, just like it used to, but it also says their cooldowns are increased by 2 and 1 seconds, respectively, for gold tier and diamond tier. So, pretty big nerf to Boiling Flask. One that I think is going to sort of balance the late game Vat of Acid builds, also the Bottle Explosion builds, and just the potion builds in general. There were just some ridiculous potions that you could stack up and have them go off, and have them consistently going off 2 times, or just having them go off 2 times to begin with would pretty much end the game on the spot. So Boiling Flask now has this change, and I think that's a pretty good one overall. Some other changes to Mac that we can see are in a couple different items being, I would say, buffed or adjusted so that they're more in line with the rest of what Mac does. We can see items like the Show Globe actually have much better scaling compared to where they were before. Going from 1, 2, 3 to 3, 6, 9, I think is just way better and makes the show globe an actual item that you would want to be utilizing. The sunlight spear has a bit better of a cooldown, things of this nature. But again, this catalyst change is really the one that I think is going to allow Mak to just kind of have a whole new build that is open to them. And also, I think it really fits with Mak's character in that you can get some really fun synergies with Mak by duplicating items or getting items with um, that have some sort of enchantment on them from reagents and things of this nature. So you can create like some super cool builds that you just can't utilize on other characters because you're transforming your items so often and consistently with an item like the Catalyst. And the next big change here is obviously Dooley. Not getting her core at the beginning of the game is a pretty big one and is honestly, I think, going to, again, be a really good change for the rest of the game here and one that I haven't played with yet, but I think is going to synergize well with what you're trying to do on Dooley, and it's going to open up more build possibilities than just the bugs. But on the topic of bugs, yes, the bugs have been nerfed. It's not the biggest nerf, I will say. The changes that they've made to the bug build are that the black spider, the blue beetle, and the yellow mantis now all start at silver tier, and they now all essentially hit one less target, which is very good and is very needed. And this will make it so that you can't get that bug build as consistently in each of your games, and you're not going to get it online as fast. And I think also with putting these items at silver tier, you'll have an opportunity to get a few more items in the early game that may shift your build away from going into the friends build, that small friends build, and thus also with the core coming in at level 3. I think this is all just kind of incentivizing you as the Dooley player to explore new builds and not just consistently see, oh, okay, I see my black spider in the shop, I see my blue beetle, I see the yellow mantis, whatever it might be. And now I'm just going to go into the small friends build because from here it's pretty easy to get the other bugs or get something to synergize with them. Notably, there's no changes to the power drill, but I think that's okay. You know, the drill is a really fun item and it's kind of core to Dooley's kit, so I'm not unhappy to see that. But additionally, let's talk about the cores. So overall here, all the cores are now starting at silver, and they're also, again, I want us to look at these numbers on them. So they're going to be doing less damage themselves or less effects, whatever stat wise it is themselves, but they're going to be buffing our other items way more. So we can see like the weaponized core here, it's not going to be getting to 50 damage, but it's going to have 20, and instead it's going to be buffing your items 20, 30, 40 damage for the fight compared to where it was for 10, 15, 20, 25 before. So this is a really honestly big way to utilize the cores in a way that is actually potent. Before, it was often that we would see where your cores may not synergize with your run, and you honestly probably just want to find a way to transform them and sell them just so you have the board space or your backpack space. So I think this is going to be a great change. And again, we can see things of this nature with the different cores that have been changed. I want to also look at like the ignition core. It itself is doing less burn, but it's ramping up more burn. The on your other burn items, the critical core starting at 50 damage, which is pretty nice, but it's also adding way more crit chance to the items. This honestly might be a little bit crazy. A diamond to your critical core is going to go up pretty quickly, and it gives plus 60% crit chance to your items to the right of it. So you can just have it go off twice, and then all those items are guaranteed crit. That's pretty crazy. But overall, I think that these are just great changes to Dooley, and it's going to incentivize players to try and find more builds in their runs. We can also see some numbers changes on some of the items, some slight nerfs, some slight buffs, nothing too crazy across the board. It's really, I think, this core change and then the bug build being the big standout things here. But I also want to mention that the robotics factory also has gotten this increased by 2 and 1 second cooldown property to it. It also doesn't have this crit chance clause anymore, so it still has the multicast, which is very powerful, but it also is increasing the cooldowns of all of your bugs. And I think that this is a very healthy nerf. I think just as we see with the bugs, they are less consistent to find and they're doing a little less overall, but they are still synergizing very powerfully all together. And one of the major weaknesses of this build was the fact that you could kind of burst the Dooley down, or you could put a lot of poison damage or fire damage onto the Dooley so that when they started ramping up their bug build, they were not killing you so quickly and they have no defense. So you were able to just kind of burn them out before they were able to permanently slow you or freeze your board. So playing into that weakness, they now have, 2 to 1 second additional charge time on all the items. I think this makes a lot of sense, and I'm pretty happy to see this. So now getting to Vanessa. Vanessa, oh man, you Vanessa players are going to be very happy to see these changes. There's a lot of buffs that have come to Vanessa. We see beach balls buffed, anglerfish is buffed, dive weights buffed, diving helmet has been buffed, elemental depth charge is buffed, jellyfish buffed, lighter buffed. The lighthouse burns for 20, and now it goes off a little less, or goes off less often because it has a higher cooldown. Pufferfish also getting the buff treatment. The one downside I would say is that the shipwreck now has again this +1 multicast clause, but it also has that additional 2 to 1 seconds on it. It also has the crit chance removed from it, which on Vanessa I think is pretty notable. Vanessa really relies on a lot of that crit chance, so this is maybe the character most impacted by that crit chance removal on their multicast item. Regardless, Shipwreck is going to be a pretty insane item on Vanessa. I think as a character, one that may suffer the least from this cooldown increase, but at the same time, it's when you saw a Shipwreck, it was basically you had to take that because that was just one of the most powerful items that you could get, and it basically supercharged your board to the point where it's pretty hard to lose from there. Not to say that I haven't. I've lost plenty of runs with a Shipwreck, but still. Other things for Vanessa, I want to point out something that isn't in this patch, which is Shark Claws. Shark Claws, as we have seen, are incredibly powerful right now. They are providing a lot of damage to your board, and they haven't been changed. So this is a huge win for Vanessa to have that item kind of escape the nerf that has been put out, the nerfs that have been put out on this patch, and I think that's pretty good for Vanessa overall. I don't know about you all, but I've been struggling on Vanessa as of recent to kind of get my builds consistently up and running. I have had success kind of going for a smattering of weapons and just overall burst damage builds that have absolutely no defense to try and kill the max and kill the dualies before they could get online. But it's not my favorite way to play Vanessa. And although the builds can be good, they're also kind of like a little boring, I would say, or they can kind of get really repetitive really quickly. You're not really going for synergy as much as you're just putting raw stats on the board. So I think that just seeing all of these buffs that we have for Vanessa, this feels really good, and it's going to allow you to explore way more builds, which is generally, I think, pretty healthy for the game. And now we get to probably my favorite character in the game, and man, I'm also happy to see this patch with Pygmalion. So pretty much buffs across the board. There are a lot of really cool new numbers changes, I would say, that are affecting items that I think were a little too weak before. So Aurora Dome being a standout one of them. I'm unsure if this is enough shielding for this item to still be good, or for this item to be good to begin with, but I think it gets it much more playable compared to where it was before. We'll see. One of the ones I'm most excited about, I would say here, is Money Tree. So Money Tree is a large item that starts at bronze tier. We can check it out here just as a little visual example. I love some visuals. So Money Tree you can get pretty early on Pygmalion, and it got the billboard treatment. So what that means is it now is going to, as we can see here, it's going to heal equal to the item's value. Instead of having this static healing that will be increasing when you spell your spare change, instead it's going to heal to its value, which also means, if we go back to the Money Tree here, is that you can also put burn properties on it, toxic properties, obsidian, shielding. All those are really, really strong on the Money Tree, even shiny, something like that, to make the Money Tree a really valuable item that you can get early game, and one that is going to be comparable to having a fixer-upper, but does something functionally different, but one that is actually viable for you to value stack. Before, really, you were just trying to, if you were trying to value stack in the early game and you got like an early rewards card or something like that, it was always going on the Fixer Upper. You could put it on the Kiosk, yes, but the Fixer Upper was generally your bread and butter for what you were trying to get big. But now you have another way to do that with the money tree. So this makes the value stacking build more consistent. And also, I would say the fact that it has this money tree specifically has the billboard treatment and is not just another fixer upper, I think is pretty good for the game. But it does have its cooldown reduced by 1 for each point of value that it has. So it can go off pretty quickly in a pretty insane amount of times. And again, if we're now trying to value stack a bronze tier large item, the money tree might just genuinely be better than the fixer upper. Shielding is very powerful in that it's going to kind of give you more max HP effectively, then you're not wasting any of your healing. But Money Tree now having this clause where its cooldown is being reduced makes it even more potent of a threat. And we can see here that it has a 6-second cooldown. So this Money Tree is going to go off pretty fast. So super excited about that change here. Another one is that Robe has been reworked. And I think this one's going to be pretty cool too. So it starts at silver tier and now has a 6-second flat cooldown. It shields for way more. And it says when you use an adjacent item, charge this 1 second. So now this is going to synergize with your yo-yos. It's also going to synergize with your matchbox. And it's going to be overall just another item that's going off quickly. So if you put an enchantment on it, your robe could do some pretty serious work. I like this change way more than what we were working with before with Robe. Robe was not an item that I ever thought fit well on my boards. Again, in a meta where shielding was very ineffective, I didn't ever want to play the Robe to begin with. So now that it's actually working and synergizing with something like the yo-yo, even a marbles, things like that, this creates another item that can kind of fit into those builds that are trying to get their items to go off as much as possible. And yeah, overall, again, Pygmalion here has just been buffed, which we love to see. I think the character, just where it was before, was kind of in the similar place as Vanessa, where they're lacking a little bit of the power that they needed to compete with Mak and Dooley. There's definitely still ways in which you could utilize their items, but to be successful, but it was a little bit harder than it was before, and it kind of made some of the builds that they relied on before, thinking something like a Beast of Burden, a little less viable just because of how much freeze and slow was in the meta. So now we have more items to play with and ones that I think will effectively make Pygmalion a more fun and varied character when he was already one of the most fun characters to me, at least before. So overall, very excited for this patch. So that's a new patch, y'all. I'm very excited to see what new builds come out of this. Also, if you think anything is going to be pretty crazy or have any ideas of what we can do to exploit or at least more effectively climb the ladder, let's say, with this new patch, I'd love to see it. Overall, I think these are great changes. And I think, one of the things that stands out to me is maybe the bug build for Dooley. Well, I imagine people are going to be wanting to see more nerfs to it. But let's keep in mind that it was pretty fun when you were first doing it. It's fun to see your items go off. It's fun to have them synergize with Dualtron and stuff like that. So we don't completely lose that build, but we have better ways to combat it. And overall, it is going to be less consistently available to us in our runs. So I'm very excited for that. And overall, I appreciate you guys watching this video. Again, the video that I put out yesterday on the meta and where it was at and the analysis of it was kind of negated overnight, but I think we're going to see some similar things shake out in the meta to come, hopefully with a lot less, or a lot more, I should say, variety from our Dooley opponents or from our Dooley players to begin with. And yeah, feeling really good about it all. And with that, again, I appreciate you watching the video. If this is your second time watching, if you could leave a like, well, I'll just say, if you could do it, I think that would bring a smile to your face. No, doing something nice, but it's the third time watchers, the people watching these videos for at least the third time. If you want to subscribe, man, wouldn't that be something to add to your life? But all this said, I have been the Bazaar Whisperer. Thanks again for watching.